All right, I am back at some programming and some streaming for another week. I am always glad to get back to doing this, but I'm really glad that I've adjusted my schedule to have some time off because it lets me refresh my mind, focus on other things, do prep work, all that kind of stuff. So, that leaves me today back on a Monday. I do think it's a Monday, yeah? Sometimes I lose track. It is indeed Monday, the 13th right now. So, I have been working on trying to get blog posts and a site and stuff like that set up. So I spent a bit of time doing that on the weekend. Of course, I never quite get everything I want done in the time, but that's going to be okay. I'm ready now to start working again on my Stylo library, a document rendering library. Today, I'm going to have two things to focus on. Which I have to first pull them up because I realize I didn't open them yet. Okay, so today's date is the 13th of the 7th month. So and okay, so today is working on the library. Tomorrow it'll be design work again using the library. I'm much further along with my designs. One thing I learned about myself last month is that if I don't force myself to actually consistently work on design work, I'll just spin my wheels forever and ever, and that's no good. So instead, I have the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday stream cadence that I want to build up, where each day specifically has, they're kind of earmarked for specific programming work. And work continues sort of in the background. I don't stream everything, but some of that stuff I think I want to make YouTube videos as well, just so I kind of I've got the stream, I've got a blog, and then I've got a stream, blog, and videos as a starting point, as sort of a content engine, if you will. That's the idea, but I shouldn't get myself too bogged down in those things. I'm about to, let's see here. If I get this all set up and ready to go, then I should be good soon. So if actually, let me try. Enough of this screen. We'll show the code screen. In just a second. All right. Here we are. Okay, so I have here the two things I want to work on for the day. Dimensions, I intended to write a post about it, haven't done it yet, so I want to see if I can slap together the draft version of it so that I could post it. If the draft is done, then I could edit it and maybe post it onto my GitHub tonight. And then on the weekend, I was using my Stylo library for document rendering, and I've known it already, but I figure it's about time to make a proper namespace and testing setup for the parser itself. So that'll be the work. That'll be kind of the big work I do today. But the dimensions thing, I have a post in progress here. These are the dimensions I'm referring to. I have them currently as a horizontal dimension and a vertical dimension function separately. What I want to do is convert it into a dimension function that will work at any, you give it any 2 points and it'll automatically draw a dimension appropriately between those points at the correct offset automatically. So that'll be kind of the work I want to do today. Let me visual line, oops, I did that in the wrong buffer here. Turn visual line mode on so that it wraps in a more neat manner. Right, so what I have here is just actually I wonder if par edit mode doesn't quite do what I wanted. Okay. I'm gonna probably disable that. Yeah. Yeah, so right, this buffer right here is a markdown buffer that is getting rendered into this document above my head here. So what I want to do first, to make it a what's the right way to do this? Well, okay, so what I'm trying to think through for a moment is, so I have this code block here, and I have these KL tags, which is short for clips, which is the plugin that actually makes these interactive, right? So interactive, I just mean like this. I can actually write code in that spot in the browser, and it evaluates it. It interprets and evaluates it and puts the result right in there. So that's useful for blog posts. Zoom in a little bit on that. Yeah, so that's really useful for blog post type things, right? Where you want to kind of talk about a singular concept, right? You could actually write out full bits of code in there and execute and show all the results and stuff like that. So that's the idea. Oops, come on. But the problem I have is, so if I refresh this page, right, these I've just copied and pasted from my Stylo library into the post, but of course they're referencing functions that are declared or that are defined in the library but not in the context of the web page itself. So I'm just thinking through how I can load that code in without it cluttering everything up. So what I think I'm gonna do actually is cheat things a little bit. I'm gonna make a little executable here. Actually, no. I'm gonna invent a new tag for a minute. KL hidden. And what I'm going to do is pop a little definition into the parser, or define an extension, I should say, which is just going to be, oops, KL-hidden, which already as I write this, extensions should perhaps have options capabilities. Example, KL and KL-hidden could be a single tag with an optional arg instead of having to define two tags. All I mean by that is just to get this functionality in there, I'm duplicating some things here when it would maybe make more sense to define one tag that can optionally read in some options that matter to that tag, right? Like, all I'm gonna be doing different here is this transform KL hidden and the only difference is it's going to have div dot hidden here, and hidden itself is going to be put into the base style base code. It's not a code. See, this is kind of I'll make a new one. I'll go like this. Hidden. Yeah, that'll be fine. So we go like this, name, style, base, hidden. And it's a source block, Clojure, like that. And all I have to do here, def, hidden, and it's going to be let's have a look here. Just like a code thing, I'm making it a list. Yeah, it's just gonna be dot hidden display none. I think should just hide it. I think that'll be enough. Right, so now that that is its own thing here, I just go to the source and add after code here, style, base, hidden, and then the build here, if I add code hidden into that, save all of this. It takes a while to tangle because there's a lot of code to tangle at the moment, which is another thing I should actually fix, because there's stuff that I should clean out of here that I don't think I need anymore. That can be for another day. Okay. KL-hidden is added into the root possibilities there. This is the extension here and the transform here. Now all I need to do is add that to this compiler here, KL hidden, and then add this key into the transform list. Right, so this structure is all over the place, and that's something I'm going to try and pull into its own namespace and clean up how it works in a little bit. Is this actually tangling? Yes, it is. Okay. So now that I have a KL hidden sort of thing, let me see if it actually is going to work. That'll be the thing to find out. Yeah, okay. Let me see how that goes. Yes, so we nicely have, if I inspect this, I should see, yeah, hidden. Right, if I take the class off there, yeah, okay, so that it just proved to me that it's hidden, but it should still be evaluating. So what I can use that for is, for the sake of a post that still showcases what I want, I can kind of just paste all this stuff, all this additional stuff in there that is irrelevant to the direct nature of the post itself. So all of these here, bounding box, center, move, scale, label, all that stuff, I can technically just paste into the hidden spot here. It's not really a smooth way necessarily. There is a clips. Look into loading code from Git SHA or something like that. Maybe it only works with gists. I don't know, but point is, instead of pasting all of the prerequisite code in there directly, you could, like, since you're on the internet, you could theoretically load it in from another source. But for the sake of getting something shown, I am just gonna clear these problems for a minute by getting all of those functions into here. Although actually, I wonder if there's kind of a cooler thing I can do. So these are all in the draw file. So what I could do instead of this, right, is let's try something a little different again. So X. So what I'm going to do is def draw string draw file as slurp of the file, that would be kind of like that, source stylo draw.cljc. Okay, so I have a string that contains the text from that file, and there's a reader. Let me oh no, let me do this. Yeah, cider jack in, pop open a REPL there. I haven't opened a REPL yet. Instead of putting it here, actually I'm gonna try this. It's just here instead. I mean, trying it to see if that's like in a useful spot or if that's kind of a silly way to do it. There's never quite enough room for all the stuff I want in my brain and on the screen at the same time. Oh well. That's the way it goes, and that's okay. So right, so read string turns a string into like its symbols and stuff like that. So if I do read string and I do eval that, it runs the code that was in the string. So what actually, I don't even need to eval in this case, actually. So what I'm gonna do is just this. So def draw file is this slurp, right? What I can do is make a hiccup thing directly, div.hidden, and then I can wrap I can do code. That would be in the parser here, transform KL here. No, pardon me, this is what I'm looking for. This code.clj.block, and then the text is actually just going to be draw file. Then that should work. Maybe. I'll find out. Hey, it did. Wow. Okay, so what I did there, right? All of these functions, bb, center, label, and all of that are defined in the file source stylo draw.cljc. This executable block here slurps that file into a string, and then this is a hiccup thing that puts that string into a code block, and then when it's got a hidden attribute here. If I just do this .cm container, save that, it will show the whole file in Eclipse element and then load it. So that's the whole source code of the draw namespace pasted in there. Now obviously I hid it because this is a lot of code. Now, funnily enough, I'm going to have a double definition of v dimension and h dimension because I have them in the draw namespace already. So it's not a perfect solution, but it's nice and quick anyway. I also realize I am not using deflm here, so I can actually edit this namespace to just be like that. Nothing wrong with that, eh? I think. So what I don't like about this approach is it's very you have to know, you basically you have to be me to be able to do this quickly, right? Because you have to know that I designed the executable thing to just execute any, it evals every single line that's in that section, and then you have to know that up front that the clips elements look for a div and a block like that, and it's not intuitive to the user at all that this would be how you do it, right? So it might make more sense to approach it in a different way later on. Let me change this back to hidden. That's the other thing, right? Like there's effectively magic CSS definitions provided. So it's not perfect, right? But it does make the post, which is the end result for the dimensions part. So that at least is good. So what I'm going to do is create, well, let me pare this down to just the bare essentials. So I have draw edges of the top here. The top, I can get rid of these cuts because for this example I just need it to be lines and stuff. So let me just get rid of those, and I don't even need to join. I can just do that, I think. Oh, let me even go one easier here. Def top is just this. And then top cut can be deleted. This can be popped like that. These can be put up here. And this can be moved up as well. Consolidate that block into here. Perfect, more or less. I do believe that should still work once it rebuilds. This should be much simpler now, just a rectangle effectively. Dimension examples. There, neat. That works for edges that are aligned to X and Y axes, but is not useful for anything on anything at other angles. We can generalize the dimension function. Right, so this now is where I am going to work on improving the dimension function a little bit. So what I need is effectively the same logic that exists in, if I go into draw here, I have this offset function which has a few helpful tools in it that let me ultimately offset an edge. So if since it's loaded in here, I can actually just go ahead and you can't see that code block. I'll just do one here for a minute, just for kicks, right? If I run the function offset and I have a list of points, I can offset it by 1. It's empty, but that's fine for now. Not a number. 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2. Huh, it's not working the way I thought it would. Well, let me see. Offset edge instead should take 2 points. Let's do 0, 0 and 4, 4. And then the offset is 2. Okay, here, offset edge nicely for us already. Gives us 2 offset points. So if I were to try and draw that, actually, okay. While I'm at it, right, so I have this here. I've stated that it's not useful for edges at other angles, right? So I can show that. Let me show that instead. Here, if I take this logic, okay, so I've got try sketch. If I just do from 0, 0 to the width, 0 to width height, and then just get rid of this, and then triangle is extrude of try sketch by the global thickness, which is up here. It doesn't really matter what it is. Now here, V dimension can be the same, that's no problem. But for simplicity, I'll just get rid of it entirely. And I have H dimension here, but instead of going from 0, 0 to GW 0, it'll have to go actually from 0, 0 to it'll have to go along the diagonal, and this will render incorrectly. but I want to draw the edges of the triangle here, like that. So there's two problems, right? The first is, obviously this is rendering in a weird way that doesn't look good. And the second problem is the length here is not calculated for us, right? It would be really nice to have it calculated on our behalf already. Because now I actually have to put in a math, like I would have to put in the quadratic a squared plus b squared equals c squared to get that value, and I don't want to do that. So this is going to be wrong, right? It's going to be 24 times cosine of whatever that angle is, right? So it's going to be like 28. But I don't want to ever have to supply that value, because I mean, if you're giving it 2 points, it should automatically do the distance calculation and print it there for you, right? So that's no good. The dimension's proper value. So the displayed dimension is manually typed in and is incorrect in this instance. Oh. Right, so the first thing to do, or the simplest thing to do initially, is use some of the logic that I already built into the offset edge thing here. I did something wrong. Oh, that's right. This is a bug. It's a broken thing in my Markdown parser. I have it chokes on dashes because I've earmarked dashes to be the start of an unordered list, and I haven't correctly accounted for the parser being allowed to just pass over that kind of a symbol if it's just in a paragraph. So that's an annoying problem, right? So, but if I pop it into an inline code thing, then the transform for the code thing runs over it and it works, right? So obviously that's no good. So if there's time today, I want to start documenting and tackling those things by wiring up my parser into its own namespace and writing thorough tests on the parser, because that's a huge pain and obviously broken, so I have to fix it. Right, so you can't see it because my head's there, but I just added some prose, a paragraph here, explaining why this is obviously broken. So now I'll just start experimenting with some code. Actually, I wonder I forget if white space is if white space is removed. Well, it certainly breaks in this case. Oh, I could do this instead. Right, so this should work. Yeah. But does this work? I think not. Yeah, okay. Silly, silly, silly. The reason I'm doing this is just to let myself have scroll past. Obviously not a good thing. Find a way to allow scroll past bottom. Oh, CSS maybe? Actually, that is a good thing, but be right back. Bathroom break. Alright, I'm back in it. If there's anyone sitting there and watching right now, by the way, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's great to be streaming and having people watching. That's really exciting for me. Feel free, if you want, to start chatting away. You can ask me questions, talk about other stuff. You know, it's all good. I like to engage. It's really enjoyable. If you're sitting there and watching and you just like it as background noise or you don't want to talk, that's totally cool too. I don't mind at all. But thank you if you're tuned in now, and if you're tuned in at some other time, thanks for that as well. Obviously you can't chat live if it's not live, but feel free to leave comments on whatever platform you're viewing it on. Let me know about feedback and whatnot, because I intend to keep doing this, and I intend to keep getting better and better. And one way to do that is to hear and listen to comments and feedback from time to time. So in order to be able to listen to it, I need to have some feedback. So if you want to participate in that way, you go right ahead. It would be greatly appreciated. But no matter what, I'm just glad to be streaming and having people tuned in. So that's really cool. All right. Let's fix this dimension thing. Let's make it actually a useful function. How about that? So I have this concept of an offset, right? So what it does, at least what it should do, so if I define some path with, let me define a path as I have a shape here as a polygon So another thing that my stylo move chunk stuff into the draw namespace and use better naming / separation between 2D and 3D stuff. As well, no, how do I say this? Need to more clearly separate the SVG, the SVG API stuff, the hiccup functions that I use to make SVG elements, from the geometry, from the functions that generate the graphical data. Example, regular polygon creating a list of points. So essentially, properly separate rendering from geom and math. I think that makes sense, right? So what I'm referring to is stuff like this. So right now I have this draw namespace in my stylo library, and what it does is just, it has some helpers, some containers, and effectively what all of these functions are things that help generate hiccup data structures. They do not do any complicated math, or they shouldn't be. This here, shapes, right? This rectangle takes a width and a height and then just pastes the width and height into a hiccup element, which gets compiled into an SVG rectangle element. So my library is just wrapping existing SVG functions here, right? In the draw, that's effectively what that's doing. The draw namespace is effectively just a helpful set of wrappers around existing SVG functionality. And so I want that to be true. I have to check that it actually is true through all of these sorts of things, right? It's confusing because transforms, you would think, is actually mathematically important, but all I'm doing is using the transform, scale, move, and rotate in the draw environment to wrap an SVG element with a group element that has a transform applied to it. It's kind of cheating in the sense that I'm just putting the actual math work into the hands of the SVG element itself. Whereas in my extensions here, this fabric extension is for quilt patterns, so I actually should probably pull that out and put it in its own unique project, and then pull in the stylo library independently, but that's a project for another day. This chunk one, I kind of want to put it should also be kind of separated, because it is actually doing math and calculating geometry and stuff, which by that logic then actually draw has this offset function which should not be here in draw. It should instead be in the extension. So as you can hear and see right already, I wasn't so clear on this beforehand. So note to self, draw should be only SVG API helpers and wrappers. Geom should be the actual heavy lifting, math/geom work. Hey Lumi, how's it going? Hope you've been having a good couple of days. Anyway, so that these need to be separated and documented clearly. Right, so that's just what I'm realizing as I look through some of this stuff here. Just joined at the end there. I think you talked about factoring into modules. Yeah, so what I'm working on right now is just kind of a short draft of a blog post about this dimension function. So I'm demonstrating how the horizontal and vertical things don't work right here, and I'm trying to make a more general dimension function. And to do that, I have previously written some offset code, and as I was looking at the offset code, I'm realizing that I kind of have different sets of ideas kind of intermingled. And so I'm verbally theorizing about a correct way to separate things out so that things are clearer all around. But so you found that factoring into modules can be a problem. Do it as late as possible. Is that because, so my guess as to why that might actually be problematic, it shapes your thinking. Is it almost like if you separate it all early, you almost your mind almost tracks too closely with the separations, and then you lose the ability to be almost more creative about how you go about it? Yeah. Once you have the boxes, you want to keep putting them into boxes. You know, that's a very fair point. My thinking, yeah. My thinking along those lines was related to let's see if I can explain it concisely. I have this sort of draw namespace, right? And the bulk of what actually happens with these functions is it just creates, you give it some arguments, width and height for a rectangle, and it just plops those values into a hiccup data structure. And then it gets directly rendered, it gets compiled into SVG. So this draw thing is basically just a wrapper over the SVG functionality. But then other functions that I've written, like this regular polygon thing here, actually does a little bit of math to create a list of points, right? So it's like there's kind of two steps. There's the math and geometry, and then you put that data into the draw thing, which compiles it into renderable SVG. So the thinking was to kind of split it on that part. That's where my brain was going. But your point about doing it as late as possible and not shaping your thinking in too much of a restricted way is a good point. Either way, I have to make decisions at some point, right? That's I think an inevitability. The point is to split things up when things become unmanageable chaos, or once you understand the domain very clearly. It's funny that you bring up unmanageable chaos, because I kind of have a feeling that my development approach has been unmanageable chaos. Now maybe maybe that's a little unfair, but there's this part of me that is worried because I didn't study development or anything in school, right? Like, I'm self-taught and self-learning more than taught, if you could say it that way. I worry that I'm leaning way too much in the chaotic direction. So part of me wants to really wrangle that in, but I guess like most things, it's this sort of art of finding balance between chaos and structure. Anyway, let's see if I actually can get my head wrapped around making a useful dimension function here. So it's in fashion now to split everything into really, really small modules, and it stems from a misunderstanding of what namespaces and modules are really for. So I'll bite on that. Is there a concise way, perhaps, that you can explain what namespaces are intended for? Because so I know that they're really useful for nicely separating out bits of functions, but actually I haven't given namespaces myself a lot of deep thought as to like the quote-unquote true understanding and use of them. So that's interesting that you mentioned that. I think the reason that I might be tempted to split things into smaller and smaller modules stems from perhaps an overreach on the idea that Clojure likes to bring up, which is immutable and pure functions, right? So small functions working on data. So by extension, my brain goes to, oh, if small functions are good, it makes sense that lots of small modules could also be good. Now, that's not a strong justification. That's just kind of a thread that my brain sometimes goes to. If that's why it's popular, I have no idea. I'm just spitting out theories, you know? Think in terms of language. This is about namespaces. If an accountant, I guess, uses the same word as something that a computer scientist would use, then you have separate namespaces. Okay. That is actually a very good point. Right, so you could, right, in a namespace scenario, right, you could have, what's an overloaded word? Right, anyway, you could call a function, right, if you could do numbers/add, right, and then that's a thing. Or you could do database/add, and then it's person 1 and person 2, right? Where in the context of the namespace itself, add is perfectly sensible. And likewise, in the context of numbers, it's perfectly sensible. But if you need to use them both in some other third instance, it's really nice to disambiguate. the add functions in those cases. That's obviously contrived, but that's a little bit along the lines of what I think you were kind of getting at there. But on the other hand, small modules isn't necessarily bad, right? I guess it's like another, well, it depends on this and depends on that, right? Interesting thing is that what people get wrong in implementation often is that we have the eval function in core and eval in Eden, and they don't belong in different namespaces in principle because they represent the same abstraction. Well, so that's interesting. In principle, then, wouldn't you... Oh, okay, they belong in separate modules, but not in separate namespaces. Okay. No, I got you. I was imagining some Clojure.eval namespace, and then you've got all possible evals and stuff like that in there, but it's not differentiated between modules and namespaces in Clojure. Okay. So maybe that's kind of a source of misunderstanding, at least for me, right? Since modules and namespaces aren't really differentiated at all, namespaces become equivalent to modules in the Clojure ecosystem in some sense. Maybe. I will admit one thing that is hard for me is, in principle, you can have modules that are not namespaces, but you cannot have namespaces that are not modules. Right. Right, but Clojure, I'm thinking of something like the test, the unit test library. It's like it's its own separate namespace and is kind of also its own separate module. It can bite you with namespace keywords. It does require that the module is loaded before you use the namespace keyword. Yeah, that makes sense. And that would be a confusing and frustrating thing to run into if you're in the correct namespace but the keyword's not loaded, and it just doesn't, it seems unintuitive that would break at that point, right? Unless you know that you have to load the module beforehand. In general, I don't have total confidence in structuring and ordering code in terms of namespaces and modules. Yeah, I do find it hard, which actually ties nicely into your advice to sort of separate later on in the game, right? If you have no confidence in it anyway, don't do it up front. Do it when you have more knowledge and stuff like that. Rich has talked about it and said it could have been made cleaner, but it's not possible to change it anymore. You've experimented with some module systems? Like you rolled your own module systems or used some existing ones? That's pretty cool. Okay, let's see. What was I even trying to do? Yeah, I mean, it's Lisp, right? Fair enough. Can roll your own everything. Namespaces are a Java class, and you can change how all that stuff works. Yeah, you definitely can. Would you, presumably, You'd have to like also roll your own sort of build system for that kind of stuff, right? Or maybe not. Yeah, anyway. It seems... No, you don't really have to? Oh, it's all still Clojure compatible? Okay, yeah, then it's no problem, I guess, right? Clojure code just gets evaluated form by form at the top level, that then evaluates the eval function. So you could change read and eval functions out if you would want to. Yeah. Yeah, it's all true. That is one thing, like, that's a really fun thing about Lisps, is that it's like, essentially it's like the minimum requirements to say this is in fact a language, and then you kind of have complete freedom to do whatever you want with it after the fact. And that's just really neat. And then existing Lisp programs are kind of just like some additional opinions built on top of the essentials to make you productive for some sense of productive. And now I'm just pontificating about Lisp. Yeah. Okay, let me define hex here. Let's do, I think regular polygon is a function I have here. Let's do radius of 2 and number of points is 6. So what I'm trying to remember is how this offset function actually works, because I haven't used it in a while. It worked the last time I used it, but hey, that doesn't always mean it works again. Offset. Points and distance. Right, so if I do def hex2 as offset of hex by 1, let's see if that will actually work. So I should see it evaluate in this code block, and we can go from there. Let's have a look here. Regular polygon is undefined, and that would be because of the fact that I haven't loaded it into the browser's context, of course. If I instead, let me see if my brain's in the right frame of mind here. No? Did it break? Offset edge. Okay. All right, let's pop into the REPL here and actually just do it this way. Yeah. You mentioned chaos earlier. I'm riding that line, man. Actually, as a brief little aside here, one thing that I was messing around with is this thing called the Clips plugin. Clips is Klipse, Clips. it turns code elements in a web page into interactive code blocks. So I can actually type right in here. Maybe you've heard of this before and seen it. I think it's really neat, and it's cool for writing short posts that have some code in them. But the problem I have is I have these two little built it similar, something similar yourself. It's trivial to make. Yeah, I didn't build this plugin myself. I am just using it, and I like it. It's really cool, in my opinion. But the thing I have here is these executed blocks here, they run, call it server side, right? When I render the document, the Clojure code is evaled, and then the result of that is rendered into the document. But if I use the interactive snippet here, I have to separately load the code into the browser's context if I want things to be usable here, right? So this regular polygon thing is not in the right context. So when I'm not careful, I'm not loading all the code into the right spots, and it gets needlessly out of hand. So that's what I mean. I'm riding that chaos line is what it feels like. So there's obviously and always room for improvement with this kind of stuff. So what I want to do instead here is load up the chunk. Let's see if that yeah. Okay. Right. Oh, not quite sure. Yeah, sorry. Maybe I didn't explain it very well. So I have this here is just put everything in one single namespace until later. Yeah, so I don't know why I never thought of doing that, but that's actually not a bad idea, and maybe I'll do that. And then reload the whole namespace with Cider. It's not a bad idea. Manual eval in comment sections. Right, like I've seen that people do that in some talks sometimes. They have all their code, and then at the bottom, while they're giving a demonstration in a talk, they've just got like 20 different S expressions in a comment block or a comment expression or whatever, and they just one at a time eval it into their REPL. But so the problem I was attempting to explain is I have two different types of I have two ways that code can work in a rendered document. The first is when I'm rendering the document, I just execute the code. So here, if I add execute 2 times 2 here, and then this one I put the clips thing here. When I render this part of the document, this executed thing will just eval this and print the result in the document. So I should see the number 4 show up in here if I got it to work properly, which not yet. But here in the clips one, this code is, yeah, so there, this code is basically pasted as a string into the document, and then once the page loads, then the clips plugin interprets the code and then runs it. So if I have some namespace that I used a function that I loaded on the that executes just fine here, but I have not loaded that code into the browser at the time where the Clips plugin is interpreting the code, then it can't run it, right? Like there might be missing symbol definitions. So all I mean to say is I now have two different, I've got the document build time thing, and I have to separately consider what parts I've loaded into here. So it feels to me like I'm complicating it more than I need to, but I don't have the obvious solution in my brain for it right now. Not sure if that makes any sense. Yeah, basically, I guess compile time and runtime is basically how you could describe that. Yeah, that makes it complicated, right? So the entire idea is not that this, like, these bits are really intended to be have a block that runs portable CLJC code and put the NS in there with conditional compilation. Yeah, so that's definitely like kind of the right way to do things. I just haven't got around to it yet. A lot of this stuff is new, right? So I'm using it for trying to like add. This is a totally different thing now, but the idea is to, you know, kind of write what I'm trying to do. And intersperse bits of code that do in fact run. But I'm realizing as I go, like you say, if you have compile time and runtime stuff, that it's adding some complexity to it, right? Find it interesting that I can work with code at all without syntax highlighting and editor tooling. Well, so I'll say this. I probably should start to add those things in a little bit. The reason I don't worry about it too much right now is because what's the easy way to say it? It's the same reason I don't feel compelled to really, really practice my typing speed, because currently, since I'm learning a lot of stuff, my ability to think through it is slow enough that the speed gains from all those tools basically don't matter, because my brain's too slow. if that makes sense. Now, obviously, having all those features is nice. I just haven't. I've not made them the highest priority because there was a lot for me to learn up front. Like, I wanted to learn Clojure, but I didn't know how to use Emacs at all. And, you know, so I decided to keep things slim in terms of what I needed to learn up front. So setting up all of that stuff seemed annoying to me at the time, and I haven't really done it yet. Now, obviously, I'm willing to grow and improve as an individual, right? So do I need to revisit that logic? Probably. But that, I just haven't, is ultimately what it does boil down to. I spend a lot of time thinking about indentation. That's a fair point. Yeah, that is a good point. Tooling. Let's see here. Makes you comfortable with working with larger modules and stuff. Yeah, that's a fair point. These aren't things I'm going to do on the stream, but actually, if I make them a priority between streams, then I can get them working fairly quickly. So par-edit or par-infer, can Emacs use them inline? Use them, make them work in org, clj, .md, etc. Find out what good refactoring tooling exists for Cider / Clojure in Emacs in general. Syntax highlighting, actually, maybe it doesn't show up very clearly, or maybe it's not set up properly, but like in org mode, there is some kind of syntax highlighting here, right? Defen has a different color and the symbol here. So there's some here. It's just not set up in the context of this markdown file. So yeah, you're right, it's not perfect. You have a quick find function where you get a quick list showing all defs in the current file. So actually, do you use Emacs or do you use a different editor? Set up a quick find type functionality. Fuzzy find existing defins and defs in projects. Fuzzy find, that seems useful. Use IntelliJ cursive, and you're migrating to Vim with your own plugin. That's cool. I have it in the back of my mind to force myself to learn Vim better than I know it now, but again, just haven't. Not using Emacs, but you've used it in the past. Yeah, so one, don't take it, you think Emacs is just fine. Yeah, so honestly, Emacs and Vim, I'm not going to argue either way about them. I like them both. I've just decided I'll learn Emacs more. Obviously, there's way more I need to learn anyway, but yeah, either one is totally fine. Better concurrency with Vim. And you can program Vim right from Clojure. That's cool. Yeah, do you use like Vim? Pretty much every modern IDE does have like Vim plugins and stuff. IntelliJ is slow and you want an environment that's stable in the long term. That makes total sense to me. One thing that has, I think, caused me some issues with a perfect setup is I love the philosophy and idea of literate programming, and so part of me is unwilling to give up writing everything in org mode files. Now I'm realizing I probably have to think more broadly about how to handle that kind of a problem, right? Because if it's just slowing me down or hampering my ability to search things and all of that doesn't end up being good. So all of these things that you bring up are very valid points, and maybe part of me is just foolishly trying to not worry about it when I really should, you know? Literate programming, you have some strong ideas. You can do it in Lisp if you just invented it. Oh, invert it a little. Lisp syntax is flexible enough to accommodate Markdown. I remember you briefly mentioning that you had brought this up a little bit before. I didn't pry too deeply on it at the time, but I remember you mentioning something like this. And you just remove it from the runtime. Yeah? I mean, like, at its most basic, right, you could, and this is obviously not how you would do it, right? But you could run, like, you could have all your code. This is technically literate programming, right? If you just have comments everywhere in there. But you are obviously referring to actually using the power of Lisp to pull out symbols and whatnot for when you actually want to run it in a different environment. Right, the comment form is just a macro. Right. Actually, that's it. You know what? Let me to explore. Comment is a macro that basically just ignores things. Can you make more useful macros to help with literate programming ideas? Lumi gives an example. Markdown, and then Markdown in here. Right. This could be a nice way to invert the idea so that the source code is the prime location, not the .org doc file or whatever. You write your Markdown in hiccup syntax? Really? That's surprising to me. I've never heard of that. So is like if you're making a literate file, you would have like this Markdown. Let's see. The title, and then P. This is a long section of prose, kind of like that. The reason that's surprising to me is just because if I had to write all of my documentation and constantly be putting it into the structure like that, I might get a little tired of doing it that way. I prefer everything just being S expressions without other syntaxes. But yeah, so that is a fair point. Right? Sometimes it's not a great idea to add your own syntax into things when you could do it with the pure structures or whatever, right? So that's a fair point too. I do know though, if I'm sitting there and I'm writing a lot of prose, I don't love the idea of thinking about bracketing everything properly, you know? It's more fun or more effective, at least in my personal experience, to just be typing, right? And then format stuff later. And you can use Emacs to overlay custom syntaxes. Right, that is already what org mode does. There's so many options and not enough time for me to do all of it, right? At least, maybe that's actually not true. Maybe this is all a lot easier than I think. But some of these things I'm not sure where to start with, you know? Okay, what was I in the middle of doing? Right, okay, this, if I want this just to be a list of points, I have to do map val onto nodes of this. Let's see. Just keeping it simple works really well, and you've grown to prefer that. Yeah. I was about to say it earlier. One thing, and this is not a bad thing at all. One thing that I've already recognized, streaming programming, I'm like very clearly I'm not like the best programmer in the world, and I'm totally cool with that. But I have like this weird sort of extra pressure, it seems, to know exactly how to do every single thing related to workflow, right? And the idea of keeping it simple is appealing, but different people kind of draw the line differently as to what simple actually means, right? Like, and all I mean to say is you could make the argument that a simple way to write a program is to open up whatever text editor you happen to have installed and just start typing out your code. Obviously, that's not going to scale in terms of your desire to do it forever, but it is simple in some sense, right? But streaming what I do, some things that I feel are simple are sometimes rightly pointed out, well, you're needlessly complicating that or whatever, you know? Confusing the terms simple and easy. Simple is often very hard and often a lot of work. Actually, you know what? You are completely right. It is easy to start a program in whatever text editor you have, but it's not necessarily simple. That's actually a really good point, and you're totally right. I have watched the talk that you're referring to, and you're totally right that simple and easy aren't the same. Of course, I go and conflate them, right? I'm not trying to be contrarian or anything like that. These are just the thoughts coming off my head, you know? And to be clear, the things you bring up, by the way, like I'm writing them down because there's a lot of stuff I need to change and improve, like for real. So it's at the very least helpful to point out how other people might think through them. So I do appreciate that. But I get that fear of, oh, am I going too easy? Am I hitting simple? Am I overcomplicating things? It's hard to know sometimes. At least for me, it's been hard. Really don't feel pressure or anything. It's just me sharing ideas, and I truly believe there's no right way or hierarchy of better for this stuff. Well, thanks for that. Let me gather my thoughts for a moment. I don't feel pressure from you very specifically, right? I underestimated how much chat comments in general would be on my mind. Does that make sense? Like, a few times things have come up about type checking and other programming languages and all of that, and I feel like, oh man, there's all these conversations going on, all these opinions that I don't even know enough to say this and that this is better, this is a different pro, and this is a con. So in general, this was an element of things that I didn't consider before I started, if that makes sense. But that's not to say that these things are bad. I really enjoy, it's literally religions. Sometimes it feels that way. And if I'm honest, that's not the kind of environment I want in the chat and as I keep streaming. So, and you're not participating in things that way. In fact, what you discuss is often just really helpful and really cool. So I do legitimately appreciate that. But oh boy, I was underprepared for just how strong opinions can be read. And the unfortunate thing about text too is, maybe someone's being totally cordial, but if I read it in whatever tone that's slightly different, right, suddenly things can change. Anyway, this is not about you specifically or anything like that. This is just me slowly realizing how streams actually work, if that makes sense. None of this is to say that I'm scared of doing this, right? Like that, I'm enjoying it. I have a good time, and I'm glad that people are around to chat sometimes. So ultimately, this is nice. I appreciate it. Am I going to get anywhere with this today? That is a question that I don't know the answer to. Oh, of course, what I wanted to see was if this hex value would show up printed here, but I didn't actually call the symbol. The thing really is that you'll notice people don't actually engage in argument. It's human nature to try to feel superior, and I see how that's annoying. Interestingly, though, you don't just run into that on the internet. You run into it at every job just as well. Well, that I completely have experienced. That's a very good point, right? In some sense, that actually kind of takes a bit of the pressure off for me. It's sometimes unfortunate, right, that human nature can lead to these sorts of things. But on the other hand, it's like, well, part of me can understand how people arrive at these sorts of things, and you almost have this sort of detached compassion for it in general. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah. All right. I am clearly not doing what I wanted to do. But yeah, it's to actually engage in an argument is definitely harder than to just state opinions, right? And I would say, like, it's much harder that you probably, in general, it's not like a thing you want to do day in and day out all the time. And I mean you, and I mean humans in the general sense. I know I can't argue all day every day. That's crazy. Okay, almost all the people that state stuff like type systems are superior don't really know much about it. They just picked a few terms here and there and throw them around because it's in right now. Yeah, so that's I think another factor in life is kind of these sort of trend patterns too, that for better or worse are like a forcing function over the general opinions and perspectives of things, right? I do my best to kind of have blinders on to what's in, not to be ignorant of it, right? But to try and keep my focus on building, like you've said earlier, systems and ideas that are simple, right? But in the proper way of simple, not just easy. It's hard though sometimes. Okay. So I have hex2 in a form that is now what offset should be there. So the whole reason I was trying to draw a hexagon was to draw a dimension along one of its edges. That was the entire reason I was going through this rigmarole. So let's draw something on this part of the screen for a minute. Let's get that done anyway. Inner hex sketch. This I'll just call hex sketch, offset, inner hex sketch. Come on, brain, focus, man. Hex is extrude of hex sketch by 1. It doesn't matter, I'm just drawing it head on. With this same kind of idea. General dimensions. Move it, sure, hex there. And this dimension is not going to make any sense, so let's just draw it from 0, 0. No, let's draw it just arbitrarily for a moment for fun. Excuse me. 4, 1. Oops. I've done something wrong. See, I've been trying to adjust the things I do on streams and my schedule and things like that. One thing that now I have to be careful with is if I go too long before working on the library again, before it's become a stable piece of code, if I wait too long, I forget what past me did, and it takes my brain too long to remember, and that's not fun to show on stream necessarily. So this is a meta problem that I'm facing, right? I should stay in the code enough that I build a better comfort with it, right? Especially because it's mine. Don't worry about what's fun to show on stream. There are literally people watching other people sleep on stream. Well, I mean, when you put it that way, I guess you can't really do anything wrong, eh? Yeah. Maybe I'm too in my own head today. Thanks for the encouragement, eh, by the way. I do appreciate that. It's very kind. Put streams on as background noise or for someone's music selection. Yeah, actually, that you bring it up, I do the same. When you're doing something boring, I find if I put on like let's say a speedrunners stream, if I'm doing like some drawing or something like that, like I have an iPad and I do like just sketching and stuff like that, that pairs really nicely, you know, on like a lazy weekend. So if I can be the background noise to other people's lives, I guess that's something I'd be willing to do. Actually, that you bring it up too, do you know get a mechanical keyboard and your viewer numbers will rise? Is that actually true? Because I'll be right back. I've got this bad boy that I have no real reason for not using. I just haven't plugged it in a while. But like, oh, you have no idea. Actually, you know, maybe I'll just try it out. I forget what I think these are Cherry MX Blue. So if that's up your alley, then I've got blue switches for you right here. You know what? While it's on my desk, I'm gonna plug it in. You've noticed yourself hanging out on certain streams because of that? Well, you know what? Honestly, like the auditory experience is like relevant. It's a non-trivial factor for sure. Let's see if I can get this bad boy working. Oh man. Well, immediately to the right of the shift key. I've never experienced this before. Ooh. Uh-oh. Well, okay, let's see if that's good enough. All right, there you go. Streams with bad microphones, no one stays, however good the content is. Yeah, that's totally true. So you can see it a little bit in there. I've got a blue snowball. It's absolutely not the best thing in the world. It's what I have, and mic related stuff is what I hope to invest in a little later, you know, as things go. But I'm wary to put too much money into things up front, right? You know, if things don't scale up to a size where it makes sense, it becomes maybe a waste of money, right? Sounds good. Yeah, so background noise is fine. Sounds like you use a laptop, right? Well, so I have I'm developing on an iMac, and I'm using a laptop to do the streaming. So you can hear the fan from the laptop, I presume, right? Like if this is closer here, you can hear the noise of the laptop more clearly. So the reason I've done that is if it's not annoying though. Okay, well that's good to know. Not complaining. Yeah, so like this setup that I've got here, if I can make this work over a longer period of time, I really want to improve it because like I've just got this webcam down here. There's so many things that I would have work a little bit better, right? But as it goes, I don't think it's all that bad for kind of an initial setup. Is a noise gate? I actually don't know what a noise gate is specifically. Oh. Is it like a physical thing or like a software thing? Oh, don't use it. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, no, when you're doing audio stuff, hardware is the right way to change things around, I find. I have my brother, he's into music and music production a little bit anyway, so once I finally need to improve things, he's the guy I'm gonna call. So I've got the right people in my wheelhouse where I can learn a thing or two as needed. All right. What have I done? I thought that I had sorted that out, but that's cool. Turns microphone off below a certain level. Oh, yeah. So actually, that makes sense. And that totally is, it's like an uncanny valley of audio, right? Like, you're kind of used to hearing some sort of ambient noise, right? But if it's totally off, and then it clicks on when there's noise again, it is weird, for sure. If you've ever been in like a small airplane, they've got these like Bose headphones that have I guess a noise gate on them, right? And it's super weird. But in the case of an airplane, it's kind of useful, right? You don't want to constantly hear the whine of an engine, but you do want to be able to talk to people. They also have them. It becomes useful in like if you're going on a road trip on some motorcycles with your buds and you have radios between each other, you don't want it on constantly because then you just hear breathing. But if you want to say something, you click it on for a minute. Proper solutions, full active noise cancellation. Yeah. Like the new AirPod Pros or whatever, they've got that going on. But yeah, in terms of audio production, I've not ever set up active noise cancellation. I would imagine that there's like some really fancy equipment you can get from like Rode mics or whatever that would have all kinds of neat tricks and tools to it. So it's complicated in terms of software as well. Yeah, I wonder if you get really into it, you could like even have spatial different, like you could have algorithms that consider the spatial stuff too, right? Need really low latency? Yeah. But it's not as accurate as newer software stuff. Yeah. Yeah, you need as low latency as possible, right? Because anything that delays the inverted wave is going to cause imperfect cancellation, right? If you could get literally real-time wave inversion of the sound, then you could get like theoretically perfect noise cancellation. Yeah, faster than the speed of sound. Yeah. It all makes sense. When I was younger and first heard about active noise cancellation, it blew my mind that like it's literally you just invert the sound wave and then the amplification between them cancels out. Like I thought that was so brilliant. It's awesome. I love it when people come up with crazy stuff like that. It's good. All right, let's quit messing around here. Oof. Let's go into got to get used to typing on this thing again. Thinking about adding it to your air conditioner. It's too loud for that use case where you use loudspeakers rather than headphones. I've never heard of someone doing that. That's cool. It makes sense, I guess. So the one thing when I was using like let's say 5 years ago, I had like some Sony noise canceling headphones. My ears would get sore after, and my thinking was, I never confirmed it, was that there's a constant positive pressure being applied to your eardrums. You can even isolate a whole room with active noise cancellation. No need for those weird materials. Yeah, so like, is there, aside from power draw for active cancellation, are there any other like negative effects? Yeah, you still need materials for reflections. Yeah, there's all kinds of crazy stuff with noise management and whatnot, eh? Currently beyond my pay grade, I'll say that much. Wait. Okay, so we've got some of that going. Let's load in the, oops. What? Oh. This keyboard's throwing off my groove right now. It's really hard to do, engineering speaking, and you need a lot of microphones. Obviously, you need to consider the time distance at different places. It's easier to do on a small scale in headphones, and even then it only becomes, it's only been high quality relatively recently. Yeah, it makes complete sense. I have a friend who has a home theater in his basement, and he loves, he's got Atmos speakers set up, and that he was explaining to me, to create the sound data and stuff like that, they use basically a 3D CAD system to locate sounds in space. So, you know, if you need to do that to create sound, to cancel it out in a room properly would similarly require like crazy 3D and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool that people like to try and do it though, right? That's the fun thing. Just because something's difficult or complicated doesn't mean that people aren't going to try and solve it. And I like that. I like seeing it. I like hearing it. And you get good audio quality out of it, right? One day I'll have the perfect audio setup. But it's probably not coming anytime soon. Okay. Regular polygon, 2, 6. Ugh. It's really cool. Probably will become more convenient and cheaper than the alternatives. Yeah. That'd be nice, eh? That would be nice. Do you work in the audio tech space at all, or just interested in it? You don't? Good isolation materials aren't environmentally friendly? Oh, It's always a big problem, too. You don't? So just keen interest in this kind of stuff, I suppose? Okay. Let's be lazy for a minute. Key must be integer. Right, so let's see if I can remember what past me was trying to do here. Like to describe yourself as having a keen interest in just about everything. Hey, I think that's a great way to live. It's a lot of fun that way. Basically anything can become a source of fascination and intrigue when you live that way, right? I approve. Not that that counts for much, but that's a fun way to be, for sure. Okay, hex. Right, hex sketches that. Why is extrude not working? What did I do? What did I do? Ah, okay. Right. If I do this, if I extrude the polygon 2D, if I wrap the hex sketch in that, that should work, right? Yeah, there we go. Right, so now, if I go here, polygon 2D of this hex sketch, if I extrude that, that should work. And I'll check in just a minute. I'm going to go to the washroom. I won't be long. Hey, we have a graphic. That's good. Right. So let's do this. Save that. Right, so the idea for a generic dimension, or a more generic dimension, is to use the offset function which takes a list of points and a distance and gives back divide by 0, eh? Well, that's just no good. Is it? Oh, really? Well, that's going to be a problem. This whole topic of vector drawing and programmatic CAD is actually a super fun topic to me. Well, I'm glad to hear that. If you permit me to go on a tangent for a moment, this has been something that's been like on my mind for a long time now, eh? I had some years ago, this is a work in progress landing page, by the way. I stumbled on originally Python, a whole library called CAD Query, and this is a post I had made some years ago with Python, and I defined 3D objects with this Python library, and was even able to produce, I've got this 3D view of the object right in here. This is using a JavaScript thing called A-frame, so you can pop it into VR if you're on a mobile and stuff like that. And so this idea of CAD and documents kind of all in one and interactive isn't totally new for me, but there's a lot of stuff I didn't understand about the underlying math and code of this CAD query library. It used a program called FreeCAD under the hood, and it was this big heavy thing, and that's not bad. It just wasn't quite what I was hoping it would be, and there's a lot of room to improve. Now, what I'm working on now is the same general idea, but what I'm banking on is if I'm building and going through these things, you know, so that I actually have an understanding of them, then I can, in theory, build out nice tools that are really useful for other design work and stuff like that. So it's not a new thing. It's been on my mind a lot, and I keep getting pulled back into trying to figure it out. But this is like, this legitimately worked as, like, I actually made a thing from a document that I had created at one point. So, you know, I have a little bit of success with this idea. I just need to, I don't know, to tie it into the idea of simple and easy. At the time, this was easy, but I don't think it was simple, you know? Yeah, all those tools are deficient, especially when it comes to constraints, auto layout, and stuff like that. Yeah, so you're latching on to exactly the same things that I noticed if you compare it to professional CAD tools that are non-programmatic. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And to throw my own 2 cents into the ring is maybe I'm not the person to solve these problems either, but it's such an alluring topic. I can't stop thinking about it in general, and to chip away at it here and there a little bit is, at least for me, it's a compelling thing to be doing. They don't use Lisp right and often have clunky interfaces. Yeah, so these are things that my general bet is that if I give myself the time and the dedication to learn things in a like a proper sort of manner, I can create examples of how this kind of thing can maybe work a little bit better. Maybe that's such a pie in the sky high goal that I'll never get there, but it's part of what motivates me to do it. So I think it's really cool. And I do love the idea of programmatically defining really complicated assemblies and stuff like that and getting them open to the world in some way, If you can version control complicated designs with basically Git diffs and stuff like that, you've got all kinds of power. Anyway, it's an idealistic sort of approach, but it's one I'm compelled to keep working on. And this is just an old post, right? Like, this is not how my current system works. And obviously this was Python and I'm using Lisp now. But yeah, there's some history there. And I just wanted to show it off for a minute. What I do like is that I do have actual, like, I actually made these things with the library I had at some point. So, I mean, it's not a perfect example of a thing, but it was fun to do. Side note, Git diff isn't as good as proper Eden Clojure diff that can consider deep structure and stuff like identifier renames, but the possibilities are endless. Yeah, that's fair enough. I brought it up as, like, before I even started working on this stuff with Clojure, the thought in my mind was, man, I have to send zipped files of SolidWorks CAD files and hope that they know how to open it and update references properly in order to share this thing out. It would be awesome if I could just have a thing of text and that's put into version control, and that's the only thing that shows differences over time. So I brought up Git diff only as that was where my brain went initially, but you're totally right that there's almost certainly even more cool things that you can dig into with more advanced diffing and stuff like that. There are good libraries for that stuff, by the way. Yeah, you mean doing deep structure diffs? Is that what you're referring to? Anyway, that's an old post, but proof that there's some output from all this work at some point. Reverse compilation thing. Yeah, so there's a possibility of being able to input an existing model and then find patterns to extract a textual description of what it represents. Reverse compilation thing. I've thought in the abstract about how cool what you describe would actually be. That would be so cool to be able to do. You could in theory make a system that, like, you could give it, maybe this is a pipe dream, but imagine you sketch like a cube, right? And you sketch it in like that isometric sort of way. You pass that into some algorithm and it can like deduce on your behalf the underlying CAD structure that it is and spit out a parametric CAD file purely from a sketch that you provide, I think that would be so neat. Would it be useful? I have no idea, but it would be cool. The trick is really to find issues and inconsistencies with that. It does exist. I figured it might. Is it like a tech demo kind of thing, or is it like something that's used in production environments? Because I've actually not heard of that yet. So I have this little sort of problem where this offset function doesn't seem to work if I have exactly 0 divide by 0, because I must have done something wrong or made bad assumptions with the math at some point here. Even the original Sketchpad program from 1968 demo included a feature like that, and it envisioned just that. Huh. I did not know. Look up documents about look up, I did not know about this. I am absolutely going to have a look at this. The mother of all demos. Douglas Engelbart, 1968. 68, there we go. That is intriguing. Oh, pardon me. Right, so there's some reason, or at some point through the logic that I had built up here, there's a divide by 0 when you give the offset 0 points. Does that... Okay, so offset edge works with zeros, but offset doesn't, so I did something silly with probably the line intersection. Right, so I have here divides. So let me just put a note here because I don't want to fix it now. This should be improved. Currently can cause divide by 0 issues. Yeah. Which is obviously no good. Oh. Is that, yeah, okay. This one I'll have to figure out later because right now I don't want to. Because as it turns out, all I do need right now is offset edge. If I want to build a dimension thing that offsets an edge the way I want, right, I can use it to build the correct points for me already. Back then, the guy used an oscilloscope to build his own computer monitor. It was a PhD thesis. Computers were gigantic, had a few kilobytes of RAM, and was able to do vector graphics in next to no time. Yeah, sometimes looking back at like old computer science videos and papers and stuff, like it's almost like, oh, it's such a shame that I can't make my computer do half the things I want it to, you know? Like it feels sometimes so silly that the modern way in which we use and work with computers is in some sense not as intelligent as it used to be. It really, I think it's kind of like as the tech gets better and better, you kind of embed the knowledge necessary to use a thing into the thing itself, right? Like cars used to have, you used to have to know how to shift manually, right? But the knowledge of manual shifting was encapsulated in an automatic shifting mechanism. And from there, people stopped having to learn that knowledge, right? And in some general sense, I'm not sure that that's bad, right? But it can lead to this sense of loss and probably in some cases be detrimental to any one person's ability to use the things that they should be able to use. So it's not perfect, but I'm not sure that it's good or bad so much, right? But yeah, looking at old computer videos, it can put you to shame sometimes. But hey, that's part of the fun of learning it again, learning it anyway. At least that's my kind of approach. Mother of all demon? It's not demons, it's demos. That would almost be funnier if it were the mother of all demons. Sounds like some like Dan Brown Da Vinci Code sequel or something. Okay, if I were to make a dimension function, I would do it over here. Dimension A, B, no text, and I would, let's see here. So if you have any arbitrary dimension, you have A and B, and so what I've done here for the vertical and the horizontal, I hard-coded offset values A, B, and mid. Yeah, so instead of hard-coding these sorts of things, I can actually use the offset function to create new A and new B points. Right? Yeah. Seem to be doing a lot of math operations on vectors using map. Yeah, there is probably a better way to do that, I'm gonna guess. Clojure / algo generic. Better math. Clojure. There are versions of the math operators plus, minus, etc. that can be overloaded for arbitrary types. Well, this is intriguing. One day I'll learn how to use this keyboard. Generics or generic? Generic. Yeah. thanks to Lumi once again. Your name's showing up all over my notes. It's great. Multi-methods that can be implemented for any data type. Generic math operators for all the arities that correspond. Generic collection, generic versions of all those. Comparison. Functor, a generic mapping operation called fmap. Math functions. Okay. That is obviously something I'm gonna look into. I appreciate that. I'm not gonna start suddenly switching over right now, but like maybe this is even something I prep and start working on. Like Thursday I could start swapping things around here and there. Yeah, so the ideas behind this, like already I can see the obvious value here, but I need to do some actual reading and studying so that I know how to use it properly there. Thanks for the pointer. That seems obviously really helpful. Yeah, basically use protocols for everything. Perfect. Okay. Let me just add that here. Oh, what have I done? One little problem with this keyboard is it has a Windows key instead of a command key, so my brain is going to control copy instead of command copy. Core libraries include not as much stuff as others because it's ridiculously hard to contribute, but they are generally super stable and never break. So this is not one of the... Yeah, no, this is... Wait, is algo.generic considered a core library, or is it a library that was built by someone else? Oh, it is a core library. Okay. Everything under Clojure namespace is core library. Okay, so I thought so. I was just hesitant for a second there. Okay, that's extremely useful. Thank you so much for pointing that out. That is something to add to the study list. So if I do let A be, if I just actually, I didn't even finish this thought here. Use that library to math operators for so that I don't have to use map plus AB for everything, for every math heavy function. I write things in a lot of parentheticals, and that's really unnecessary. Don't know why I do that, but I do. Right, so this I can use offset edge by AB, and that should produce for me an offset AB. Whoop, what have I done? There. So mid. Do I have a proper mid function? in this offset spot here. Line intersection, every other offset. A few more years of using Lisp and your sentences will have deeply nested parentheses. Actually, maybe that is legitimately why I use a lot of parentheticals in my prose. That's hilarious. Everyone's gonna hate reading anything I write. All my emails are gonna be just these obtuse but beautifully simple collections of S expressions. I was explaining to one of my sisters actually the other day about it's called prefix notation, I guess, is like the official thing, right? Where the operator's in front of its arguments. I was explaining to her how that if we were to use that like in written math that we had to do growing up, that you would technically not need to know like order of operations, like BEDMAS or PEMDAS or whatever the name is. And she thought that was pretty cool. Have you heard about APL? The name, I've heard the name before. I actually don't know anything about it though. What is that? It was invented before it was implemented in a computer. I missed this. Your notes look a lot like nested parens and stuff like that. Not easily expressed with regular English. So APL, it was invented before being invented in a computer, was an alternative notation for math because the guy realized math notation was horrible. So I do agree with that sentiment, to be totally honest. When I was studying, I studied mechanical engineering. I don't consider myself an amazing mathematician or anything like that, but I know enough to figure out how to do math. But the notation was always something that I really hated. Like just writing all of those symbols, and it just was always frustrating for me. And since I started learning Clojure, there are certain things about math that have actually become way easier for me to understand. And I thought that was neat. It's pretty cool. Things being ambiguous, it's horrible in physics, but there are things in computer science as well. Well, so yeah, totally. I kind of suspect that the theoretical ideal for any one subject is a description with no ambiguity, but in the real practical world, quote unquote, ambiguities are very likely to arise because of how humans have to transmit knowledge via communication channels and stuff like that. There's a survey done on the different uses of notation across 500 or so papers, and they literally use conflicting notation. 100 different ways things were written. I kind of wonder sometimes if there's no way to use a computer to read those papers. Oh, what a crazy world we live in, eh? Yeah, programmatically. Right, because you need, for every different type of notation, you kind of need the human to be there as the interpreter, kind of, right? It's just computer science. Physics is even worse, often. Oh. Well, I kind of that ambiguity happens makes a lot of sense, right? Like you could communicate everything in sets of binary words if we wanted to, but that's not really efficient in the human timescales of communicating, and Humans are trying to communicate complicated things with each other, and we all think about it a little different, or we write it down differently even though we're saying the same thing, and everything blows up in crazy ambiguity. It's almost comical. But hey, we do our best. We do what we can. I am going off the rails today. I hope that's okay. Okay. Offset edge. What happened to what? Here, this is what I'm looking for again. This dimension. I'll just cheat and use the bounding box center thing again, because for right now that'll be okay. Should be. And the label offset is hard-coded from visual inspection. Let's make it obscure so the reviewers get confused enough to accept it. I mean, they don't get anything in return, so they won't spend much time, hopefully. Do you speak from experience on that one? That's a little bit tragic if that's the reasoning for creating obscurity. That's kind of too bad. Or is that a little bit tongue-in-cheek? Alright, so this label offset, I'll leave it like that. That's fine. Right, so let's see. Right, this function I'm going to start by just drawing the two arrows, because that's the easiest way to, that'll be the simplest place for me to start. This first arrow I'm going to draw from yeah, I'll make this, I think this logic is going to be pretty similar to the same thing. Oh, no, it's not, because I have to offset it along the path itself, which is not necessarily going to be aligned with this. Well, let's start even easier. We'll go A, mid, like that, or mid A. And this one, arrow, arrow, mid to B. Okay. Oh, let's wrap it in a list for simplicity. Just like that. Save that, give it a try. It's a complicated issue. This is part of it, I think. Another one is that publishing is essential. People are pushed to write shorter and shorter papers, and that leads to tricks in notation. The actual obscurity is rare, and people actually publish separate materials to reproduce. That being said, it's not my experience, but mostly people I've talked to. Yeah, I guess, you know, if there's things that people are doing that seem negative in some way, it might hint towards something like the incentives that exist in the system being the thing that kind of drive that sort of behavior, right? Like the need to publish, it makes total sense that if I write one paper that's really long and dense, but I need to publish frequently, well, why not split it up and publish a few different things? Like, that makes sense. But yeah, it can be a shame. I've never done that. I've never done PhD level stuff though, so I can't speak from experience either, but it makes a bit of sense to me. So now if I have a quick look here, right. Well, let's get rid of that, because we're just starting with the easiest thing. Love doing the easy thing first, and then build up from there. Oh. It looks like I'm going to have to get going in about 20 minutes or so. Got to hit the gym at some point today. I was really productive this morning working on some other stuff, so I don't feel too bad about just the casual approach I take on stream. I'm pretty fine with that. It's not always about writing as much code as you can, right? Sometimes it's about just letting your brain do what your brain's got to do. Right, so if I do dimension from, let's say, take 2 from hex sketch. Oh. Apply. Take 2. What have I done? By the way, have you started to use spec more at all? Yeah. So the way I'm trying to kind of earmark different streams for different sort of activities, you might not see it a ton on the stream, but behind the scenes I'm really working to spec up a lot of stuff, and my comfort with it is improving every day. So it seems to me like it's probably a really useful tool to use more and more, so I've been intentionally trying to work it in there. You won't necessarily see it reflected in this library yet, but it's coming sooner rather than later, so yes. I also last week spent some time actually trying to get my head around writing tests. Not in the generic sense of this is what a test is, this is how you do it, but in the sense of what sorts of things are worth writing a test around in general. And I'm nowhere near perfect at that, but I'm starting to work on that skill as well. So spec and tests are both more integral tools in my tool belt now, which I think is probably a good evolution of how I want to go about these things. Unfortunately, I'm not showcasing any of that today, right? So you just have to take my word for it. But keep your eyes open, it'll be coming sooner rather than later. Because I do think it's probably better. Oh, I'm being silly again. Offset edge. I didn't actually offset it by anything. Right, so the offset I used here was hard-coded as 2, so I'll put that there. Try that. There we go, okay. No, that's not the right thing to test. There. Right, so now we have something. Let me try. Let me just try this exact thing here. Right, so if I do apply dimension, take 2 of hex sketch, see if that actually will draw. The whole point of spec is to help you narrow down problems in your code. Contract systems like spec have been specifically designed for that. In that sense, in combination with a trigger like a test, they synergize. Yeah, when I was reading through the unit test, like Clojure test, like documentation page or whatever. Oh, I broke it, of course. They showcased a little bit, like they just scratched the surface on how you can use spec in a sort of integrated way with test, and it seems like a good combo. One thing I'm not good enough at yet is writing out a contract up front, right? Like, all of my streams are a lot of messing around in the REPL and prototyping and, oh, what if I did this? What if I did that? So much that I don't even have up front a concrete idea of what kind of contract I might even have, right? So I can't produce specs up front anyway. It's not that common to write contracts before the code in Clojure or Lisps in general. It's more of a Haskell thing. Oh, so I guess maybe the assumption I had made was that, like test-driven development, where some people will suggest that you write tests before you write an implementation, so that you're running them and they're failing until you write an implementation and they pass. My assumption was that you would use contracts in a similar way, but perhaps that's not the case. Just to write tests and just arrange things and try it out symbolically. Yeah, I guess so. Well, as is plainly obvious, there's a lot of things I have to learn and a lot of things I can streamline in my sort of workflow, right? And those sorts of things are definitely one of them. Why did dimension not exist? What was the reason for that? Have you heard the quote, everything should be built top down except the first time? I've actually never heard that quote. Top down would be test first, but if you don't understand the domain or the pieces, you can't do that. That makes sense. So in theory, I love designing things top down, but I have always found in practice that it never quite lives up to whatever top down thing you try to design. And so yeah, Clojure's bottom up by default. That much I recognize. That was one of the reasons I decided it would be important for me to learn it and Lisps in general. And it's really good at bottom up. Well, so REPL-driven development is almost like it strongly encourages bottom-up approaches, right? Because you play around with these small little S expressions like Lego blocks, and you just build it all up and up and up. It's very clearly intended to be bottom-up, and I love that, as it turns out. Bottom-up means you have running code. Yeah, like you're always highly interactive. That high interactivity is part of what I want to keep striving for if I'm building tools, right? Like, obviously this example here, I'm writing a document and it's automatically building and refreshing here. It's delayed, so it's not nearly smooth enough. But that's a higher level example of that high interactivity tight loop or whatever. Question remains if you need to generalize all the time. Often you don't. Yeah, I wonder if that's like the question that people don't ask, is, well, do we even need to take this further? Is the setup we have now sufficient for the needs we have? Unless I'm misunderstanding what the point you're trying to make. It's totally a reasonable question to say, whoa, must we do blank next, or are we good? It's a totally reasonable question. Often ends up in a mess. Bottom up means unopinionated. Top down implies opinionated in some way. Bottom up generally ends up with libraries that are messier to work with. And of course you cannot ever change anything and they can't evolve. Bottom up libraries can't evolve, or top down libraries can't evolve. I lost the thread there for a moment, sorry. Okay, so this more useful, or this dimension function so far is a little more useful. So the next thing I want to try add is these lines here. And in order to do that, I do need I what's the right term for it? I shadowed, like I overwrote the original AB with new AB here, but I actually don't want that. A offset, B offset. So the next things to draw would be a line from A to AO, and a line B to BO. Top down means library is based on abstractions. Bottom up means there's no abstractions, it's just data. Consequently, you can only change through accretion, which is not necessarily a bad thing, just a different tool for different use cases. But say ring interop layer between different HTTP server libraries, it's a top-down abstraction and it enables swapping of components. Right. So interestingly enough, it kind of seems like if you take a systems view sort of thing, right? Clojure encourages on the library level and the module level and all that, bottom up. But it also, to me anyway, kind of seems like systems really often are just kind of loose collections of libraries themselves, which sort of resembles a bottom-up approach from a systems level as well. Now, maybe this is where my understanding of these terms that you bring up is incorrect, but it kind of does seem like Clojure, from the bare bones, or from the core of Clojure up to systems designed by it, they kind of tend toward bottom-up approaches in general. But like in the case of Ring, I guess a well-designed top-down system allows bottom-up systems usage. If what you mean by systems is, say, REST APIs or something, no, it's generally top-down. So fair enough. Then I guess I'm slightly misunderstanding your definition of top-down, which is totally fine. I always kind of assumed REST API is an abstraction. Yeah, I understand that much. I always kind of assumed bottom up and top down were like fairly broad and generic sorts of abstract terms and concepts, I mean. But it seems that in the cases you're referring to now, they have a little more of a specific meaning than I originally thought. So top-down library based on abstraction. So that is more specific than how I was thinking about it. That I guess is where the difference comes from, or my misunderstanding, I should say. I've been chit-chatting a lot today, and I gotta get going soon. I want to see if I'm angling in the right direction for this dimension function, though. Pardon me. Did I break it again? Indeed. AO is not in this context. Oh. Silly mistakes. Oh, Lumi, this is a totally. Oh, I goofed something there. That looks weird. I'll work on that. This is a question earlier when we were talking about the mechanical keyboards. You briefly mentioned you sometimes tune in for other people's music selection. Is there like, and maybe you don't know, and maybe I just have to look this up. Like I assume there are like legally totally allowed songs that you can stream, right? Like they're stream friendly artists or whatever. It's complicated. Of course it's complicated. It always is, eh? This here would be what I need. A lot of people stream whatever in it and then nothing ever happens, but it's technically not legal. Yeah, I kind of thought that was the case, that if you're kind of a smaller streamer, you can kind of get away with stuff like that, right? It'll result in muted content. Very big streamers do it too? Huh. don't get VODs for long times anyways unless you're partnered, so it's not such a big deal. Yeah, that is a good point. Oh, right, because the VODs then would show up with muted content if you're playing copyrighted songs, right? I assume that's what you mean. Video game music's generally okay, given that people stream video games. Yes, they certainly do. When I'm not streaming, I listen, and I'm working, I listen often to stuff like lo-fi, hip-hop, chill, this, that, whatever. It's the latest hotness. At least I hear about it all the time. So I was kind of toying with seeing if there's some like stream-friendly music like that I could play along with it, but I haven't given it too much thought. It was just, you mentioned it earlier, so I was curious about it. It's a lot of royalty-free, but a lot of that's generic and boring. Well, yeah, that is the other thing, right? If I go royalty or like whatever legal stuff, it either runs the risk of being the same stuff that everyone already uses, or it's just not very exciting. I don't have a solution to this. I also don't know how much I need to or want to put music on anyway, but it's something in the back of my mind. But very clearly I'll have to kind of make my own decisions about it, right? Seen a few streams do it only on a Sunday stream. Oh, actually, that's a good idea. Use it as a special stream type. Example, casual Sunday, casual or otherwise Sunday streams. I have a few streams do it only on, say, seen a few streams do it on the Sunday, specifically where new stuff was tried out. So yeah, okay. Kind of like let's test the waters sort of thing. That all makes sense to me. I wanna keep streaming and not like bring myself to anxiety thinking about all these sorts of things. But if I completely disregard rules and stuff like that, that's obviously not good either. So balancing what I want versus what I can do reasonably well is always on my mind. Okay, I have to get going. I am happy with the casual nature that I had going today. It calmed me down. I had been anxious last week and this and that, so I feel good about this. Unfortunately, I didn't get nearly as much work as I thought I could finished, but that's the way it goes, and I'll have time this evening to finish some of these things up. What I am really hoping I can do is clean up this Markdown document and actually get it posted into like a little blog post of its own and have a working dimension function here. I think I could probably do that tonight or tomorrow morning, so I'm happy with that. And I had a good time chatting with Lumi here, and if anyone else is sitting there watching, thank you so much. Yeah, I gotta get going now, but I am gonna be back tomorrow. I'll be working on finalizing a few design things, and hopefully the next time I talk about my little desk design thing, it'll be actually built and a physical thing, because it's about time that I get that done and move on to more substantive projects. So I'll see how things go tomorrow. I'll see how my night goes today, how my evening goes, and how my morning goes tomorrow. But it's a long way of saying, all right, I'm going to get going now. I hope everyone has a good time. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for chatting. I really appreciate that. And I will be back tomorrow. It was fun? Yeah. Thanks, Lumi. Have a good one.